Hi there! In today's unconventional coding session, I am going to be working on my ChatGPT Clone in C project. So here is what we have so far. So if I build this project and I run it, then we have this beautiful ChatGPT UI here with a sidebar with nothing in it and a message input. So we can say hello and we get a message back from ChatGPT. And we also implemented word wrap. So if I say something like write an article about PHP, then we get an article here and we can scroll, and also we have word wrap. So if we resize the window, it will automatically word wrap it. And we made it from scratch. But in today's video, what I would like to do is I would like to first of all style this message area a little bit better so that we can distinguish the messages, the user messages from the assistant messages. And then I would like to add in the sidebar an option to add new conversations. And then we should be able to change between the conversations. So let's try to do that today. Now I would like to add a background for the assistant messages. So let's try and do that. So in our code, we have a function draw text wrapped, and here we are drawing the text line by line. So we have our measure text function here, which comes from Raylib, and it will measure the text which we iterate through character by character. So we add one more character every time and we measure the text and we check if it still fits in the line, then we continue, otherwise we are going to draw the line and then move on to the next line. Now we actually calculate the size, the height of the whole message, and we return it here. So when we call this draw text wrapped here, then we actually know how much we have to move the Y position down so that we can draw the next message. But the problem is that we are calculating the height at the same time as we are drawing the message. So if I would here draw a rectangle for the background, it would actually be on top of the message. So we can't do that. So we should either create a separate function that only calculates the height, and we could call that first and then draw the background, and after that only draw the text on top of the background. Or what we can do is we can go to our draw text wrapped function and we can draw the background separately for each of the lines. Now this is not ideal, because what if later we want to have like a gradient or a background image for each of these messages, which I probably don't want, but you might want to do that. Then it's a bit difficult. But I'll try to do this way at first, because I just feel like there's going to be extra calculations if we have to calculate first and then draw it. I guess we could save the lines into some sort of array as we calculate it and then just pass in that array later, and then we can draw all those lines later. But let's do it this way first. So we are going to draw a rectangle before we draw the actual text. And draw rectangle takes position X, position Y, width and height and color. So let's do this. First we have the position X. So let's at first just put it at the same place as the text. So it will be position dot X and position dot Y, because we pass in this position vector up here in the draw text wrapped function, which will be the position where the line should be drawn, or the message, and then we change it for each of the line. So let's do that. And the width will just be the width of the available space for the message. And the height will be the line height. And then we have the color. And what is the color? Well, we have to actually define it. Now I want to actually only draw the background for the assistant messages. So I'll pass in background color here, and I will add it into this function. So we have color, which is now called tint. I will actually change it to just text color, and then I am going to add here color background color. So we can then use that. here. And then when we call text draw text wrapped, we have to pass in the background color. Now I want it only for the assistant messages. So let's set message background, and let's do this. Color message background is going to be the background color for the whole message area by default, and then if I is divisible by 2, or actually I think not divisible by 2. Wait a minute, how does it work? Yes, so because 0 is the first one, so if it is not divisible by 2, then we are going to change the color. So message background will then be some assistant message background, which I will define now up here somewhere. Let's define message assistant message background, and it will be a color which will be something. So I want it to be darker than the background color but lighter than the sidebar color. So I will set it something like 55. Actually that is the same as the input background, so I will make it lighter than that. So let's do 59 to 55. So now we should actually be drawing a background, but it's not going to be in the right place. So I'm going to run it and I will say hello, and for some reason the O dropped from my message. But as you can see, maybe you can see, it's very faint, but we do have a background here. But I want to have some padding in the background. So let's change that. And I want to start right from the left side and go all the way to the right. So how should we do that? Well, first of all, in our scissor mode, which makes it so that we only draw in a specific area so that we can have the scrolling effect, we are not going to have UI gap in the Y position, because I also want it to start right from the... So we will scissor from the top, and the X will also be only sidebar width. And the Y position is where we are starting to write or draw the messages. So I will also remove the UI gap from this. And the current scroll will be 0. And am I limiting the scroll here as well? So max scroll is UI gap minus message list height. So I will remove UI gap from here. And the width is calculated up here, which also removes the UI gap, which I will now remove. Although I still want to have the UI gap for the text, but then I want the background to be all the way. So let's leave it at that. And let's actually try now what it looks like. And I will actually add my testing material here so I don't have to send messages to ChatGPT all the time. So now it looks like this. Okay, so we are starting from here and up there, so that's fine. And if we scroll down, then it scrolls, I think, a little bit too much. So the height of the scissor mode, this should be only minus UI gap times 2. So let's do this again. So that looks nice. So now we have the same amount of margin around this message box everywhere. But the width should be bigger. Now I am not sure if the width comes from, where does it come from? Let me run this again. Okay, so the text starts right from here, but I want there to be the UI gap. So let's add that there. So width is fine, that is the width of the text, but the scissor mode, I have to add the UI gap times 2 to this one. So the scissor area is the whole area. And I might actually set the scissor mode here to start from 0, but I will still add this UI gap here. So the text will start from sidebar plus UI gap. So if I build and run this now, then the text is now here in the correct place. But what happened now to the width? What did I change? Get render width. Wait a minute. Okay. What did I do wrong now? UI gap times 2. Begin scissor mode. Wait a minute. What did I change now? Let's go back to this. Now it goes to the end. What did I do? If I add UI gap times 2 to the width, it will be just longer. If I set the X to 0, what? Sorry, x is of course not 0. Let's go back here. X is going to be the sidebar width. Okay, so we want to cut from this until the end. Okay, so now it is looking like I want it to look. But I want to then make the background wider on the sides, so it goes all the way to the end, which means that when I draw the rectangle in here, I want to subtract the UI gap from the X position, and I want to add UI gap times 2 to the width. So let's run this, and now it goes all the way to the end. So now it looks very nice. But then I just want to add some sort of margin to the top and the bottom of the rectangle. So what I'm going to do is I am going to move the text down a bit. So how am I calculating the position here? The position comes from here, which is X and Y, which will be the current scroll position, which will start from 0. So what I have to do is I have to first draw the rectangle, and I had to add to the line height some sort of padding. Let's call it message padding times 2, because I wanted the top and the bottom. Now I used somewhere some message gap, but I don't want this anymore because this was the gap between the messages, but now I want only to have the padding that is inside the message. So I will remove this, and I am going to change it to the message padding, and I will add like 30 pixels of padding. So now I will draw a bigger rectangle than the text needs. So it will be bigger than the text. But then I have to move the position or the text height. I have to calculate the text height now based on this. So I have to add this to it. But the position Y will still just move down by the line height, because this is the text line, but the text height is the height of the whole message. So maybe I should change it to like message height. Let's call it a message height. And let's build and run. And now it's starting to look a little bit better. But now I want to move the text down the padding amount. So can I do something like this? Can I draw the background rectangle, and then can I say position.y plus equals message padding? And then if I run this again, then now this is in the middle, and they're all in the middle. Are they properly spaced? For some reason, there is more space in the user messages, which I'm not quite sure where that comes from. Probably there will be still some kind of gap between the messages. So let me actually change the color of both of them. So where I am setting the color, I will actually set it to the sidebar color for now. Okay, so there will be some gap here for some reason. And also there is a gap here, but there should be only one line break here. So something is wrong there as well. So let's go back to draw message wrap, and we draw the rectangle and we move the Y position by the message padding, which actually is not correct because we are doing this for every line. We should only do it once. So maybe from the X position of the rectangle, we have to remove the message padding. Sorry, position Y, we have to remove the message padding so that it will be higher. And then we have to add to this position before we get into the loop. Which seems that this is not a very good way of doing it, but let's see what it looks like now. Okay, so the text is now in the correct position, but since we are drawing the padding for each of the lines, then it will be on top of the previous line. So what we should do is we should only draw the padding top if we are on the first line. So let's call this top padding, and let's say if is first line, then top padding is this. Otherwise, top padding is 0. And let's say is first line is false here, and this of course has to be integer, and is first line we can set here, bool is first, line is false. Sorry, it is true, of course. So now the first line only will have the top padding. So let's see what that will look like. That will look exactly like a 1. But we are making a little bit too long of padding in the bottom. Why is that? So the line height, or the height of the rectangle, will be the line height plus message padding times 2, which probably has to be message padding plus top padding, because the later ones don't have the top padding. So that will probably be correct. And it is. But now we are still moving the Y position too much so that we will have this space between the messages. So down here we also have to say message padding plus top padding. So if we build and run, we still have a little bit more, some extra here, which is interesting. So message height will be the line height plus message padding plus top padding. Why is that incorrect? Because that is exactly the size of the line. Do we not need the top padding here? Apparently not. So why is that? Probably because we moved the position Y already by the top padding, so we don't need to do it here anymore. Interesting, but it works, so I will leave it at that. But yeah, the first one looks weird. Why is the first message like that? So if we add the top padding, then the first one is correct, but the second ones are not. So why is that? That is interesting. So is it because of the multi-line nature of this thing? I think it is. So if we have multiple lines, then it will add this space. So do we not need the message padding then? Here, only the top padding. No, that does not work. Although, all of them look the same now. So all of them have the same bottom padding. So what does that mean? That means it should work if I add message padding. Or I only have to add message padding to each of the messages, of course. Now I'm adding the message padding for each of the lines. So I have to add just message padding to this. So in fact, I will start the message padding, or message height as the message padding. So now, if we run this, it looks perfect. And hopefully, if I now change the padding, then it will just work. We don't have to mess with anything else. So if I go here and I actually want 40 pixels of padding and I build and run, then it still works. Okay, that looks pretty nice. And I might even keep these colors. So the original idea was, where am I using sidebar color? Original idea was to use background color here. And actually that looks pretty nice. So I am going to leave it like this. I will make it a little bit darker. 62. And run it, darker. That means 47. And that is a bit too dark, so I am going to do 40, 48, 49. Still a bit too much. 52. What was it? I think it was 52. That looks fine. So now we have a little bit of a nicer looking UI, I think. And it is still responsive, and we still have word wrap, and it doesn't quite work. Newline does not work. So why does that happen? So there should be just one new line here, which should be the same size as just the wrapping of the word. So that is a problem. Am I not removing the new line? Where is my new line? So if it is a new line, then we will create a new line. We will print a new line. But we should remove the new line from that line, which should happen here, because we are checking if it is a new line by looking at the line index of the line buffer. If that is a new line, then it is a new line. And here we are setting it to nothing. But I think we are going back to the line space position because a new line is a space. So we have to add if not is new line. So if we now run it, then now it works. Maybe it still doesn't work. Why not? Let's do this. Let's print here. Oh, and I have to add it there too. So we are going to move back one index if it is a new line. So that is the problem. We are actually printing the new line on its own line, but this still didn't work. So what is the problem here? Actually, we are already checking if it is a new line. Yes, so what is going on here? Let's see if we are actually like writing a new line or drawing a new line. Let's do this. If line buffer line index, or in fact 0 is a new line, then printf new line, and let's see if we can find that, because we don't want to print any new lines, and we did not print any new lines. So that is not the problem. What is the problem then? Let me see. If I add multiple new lines here, if I add a new line here as well, is it only going to add the extra space after the first new line? It is not. That is very interesting. So what is the difference now between an actual new line and when the line width is too long? Should we printf the line buffer? And let's add some pipes around it so we can actually see what is in there if we actually are printing the new line here. So that might add a new line to it or more spacing. So let's do this, and we are not printing any new lines. We always have a pipe in the end. So that means for some of the lines we are moving the position down more than others. But message height should not change that at all. So why is line height different for some of the lines? Let's actually do this too. Let's add it here, D, and that will be the line height. And line height comes from text size Y. We are measuring the text before we remove the new line. Okay, that is the problem. So we have to do this. Can we just trim it? Can we just do trim? I think there's a trim in C, which will just trim the trim. I can't seem to find trim. Trim C. Okay, so there is no trim apparently. So I am going to just do this. I'm going to move this down, and I'm going to add here if is new line. Then I am going to remove it. So can I do this whole thing up there? Because here I'm removing it. I think I can. No, but I have to. Let me just do this. If it is new line and it is not last character, then we are going to remove the new line. I have to do some refactoring here because this is getting a little bit too complicated, and I think I am overcomplicating it because now it looks nice. So let me remove my printfs from here, just this, and let me run it, and now it works like a charm. So then I can just do that, and we still have word wrap, and it works perfect. Amazing. So now what we should do next is we should add the ability to change between conversations. So let's try and do that in this video. So first I'm going to commit all of this, and I am going to then move on to the next thing. Git commit m improved styling of messages. So we want to have multiple conversations. So how do we do that? Well, here we are defining this message list with a maximum number of messages and a maximum message length. I will just add here max conversations, and I am going to add that here, max conversations. Let's do 25. And if I then try to compile this thing, we will get a bunch of errors. Now, let's go through these errors and fix all of them. So first of all, 339, we are passing in the message list, but we want to actually pass the message list of the current conversation. So we also need integer current conversation, which will be 0 at first. So instead of message list, we are going to pass in message list current conversation. And we will do that for all of these references to message list. And let's try to recompile it. And we get a segmentation fault. Now, I think the reason for this segmentation fault is that we are allocating all of these messages on the stack. And there is not enough room in the stack for all of these messages. So we should move them to the heap with malloc, but I'm not going to do that in today's video. So I will just make it a little bit less big. So I will just have 50 messages per conversation. And now we can actually open it and it still works. So then what we can do is we can actually test and say hello. And did we actually get it? We get the message. So then what we can do is we can loop through all of the conversations and make a button for them. So let's do here conversation list draw. And what are we going to pass in here? We need the message list. And we should probably have a counter as well. So let's add int conversation count is 0. Or let's set it to 1 at first. So we are going to initialize a conversation. And then what we are going to do is we are going to pass it in here. We are going to pass the message list and the conversation count. And let's create this function. Void conversation list draw. And we will pass in the conversations of the message list, which is star. We will pass the whole thing. This one. It will be that. And we are going to pass in the integer of conversation count. And this is of course a char. So then what we are going to do is we are going to do for int I equals 0, I less than conversation count, I plus plus. And we are going to draw a button. So let's do draw rectangle rounded. And we are going to pass in a rectangle which is going to be in the x position of UI gap and the y position of UI gap plus y, let's say. And let's add int y is 0. Or we could add int y is UI gap. And then we just add y here. And let's add x too. So int x is UI gap and int y is UI gap. And we are going to draw it there, and the width will be width. Let's add that as well. And the height will be height. And let's add int width, which will be sidebar width minus UI gap times 2. And int height is going to be something like, let's do sidebar button height. And let's define that. Let's say define sidebar button height, and that will be like 60 pixels, something like this. And then we are going to draw a rectangle at that position with those dimensions, and then we are going to set the roundness to 0.5f and segments to 1, and the color is going to be sidebar button color. And let's define that as well, and I will define it as white. Sidebar button color. I will also define, actually this should be background color, and this is the color. So this one is going to be black. So this is going to be the background color. And let's do a char button text with, I guess we have to set like a max title len, and then we can do sprintf, and we are going to print into button text the following thing: conversation d, and d will be the I plus 1. And then we are going to, actually let's set this one first. So let's do define max title len to be like 64. And we are going to write into the button text conversation and the number of the conversation. And then we are going to draw text X again with the font. So we have to pass in the font here, and we have to pass in the button text, and position will be what? It will be a vector 2, and the position will be text X and text Y. And then we have to pass in the font size, which will be something, sidebar button font size, and spacing is 0, and color is going to be sidebar button color. And let's define this size. So where should I define it? Define sidebar button font size is going to be, let's do 25. And I'll actually move it here. And what is text X and what is text Y? Well, int text X is going to be the X position of the rectangle plus the width of the rectangle divided by 2 minus the text width divided by 2. So first we go to the left side of the rectangle, the button, and we add to it the half of the button, so we will be in the middle, and then we have to subtract half of the length, the width of the text, to make the text actually go in the center. And to get the text width, we have to say that vector 2 text size is going to be measure text X, and again we pass in the font and the button text and the sidebar button font size and the spacing. So these things. And I am going to say that the int text width is going to be text size dot y, sorry, X. And I will add the font here, font. And what is text Y? Well, text Y, we have to also get the text height, which will be text size dot y, and int text Y will be the Y position of the rectangle plus the height of the rectangle divided by 2 plus minus the text height divided by 2. So the same thing. So it should be in the middle. And that should work if we add a semicolon here and we pass in the font here. So font. And let's see if this actually works. We actually have conversation 1 here. Great. Now nothing happens if we click it. So let's do this. I guess we can add to this draw function the handling of the clicking of it. So we can add here if is mouse button press key mouse button left and check collision point rec. If the point of the mouse, so get mouse position and the rectangle, which we actually should save as rec. So let me get this as rec, and rectangle rec is this. Then if those are colliding, so we are clicking inside of the button, then what we are going to do is we are going to set the active conversation, or what did I call it? Current conversation. Current conversation to the I, which is the index of the conversation. And I have to actually pass in that one. So I will pass in the integer pointer of the current conversation. And then I can actually dereference it and set it to I. So then if I go down here and I pass in here, where did I put it? Before the font. So I pass in a reference to the current conversation, then we should be able to change the conversation. But of course we only have one conversation, so nothing happens. So let's add a button for adding new conversations. So let's say new chat button draw. And I think we need the current conversation here. And I might as well move it to the conversation list draw, because we have all the stuff there, so it's easy to implement here. Maybe it's too much for one function, but let's do this. Let's first create the new chat button. So we probably should create some sort of function to create a button, but for now I will just copy paste. And we are going to create a rectangle, and we are going to set the text directly here to plus new chat. And we don't have to do this. Well, I guess we could just set the button text to plus new chat like this. So then button text can be passed in here and it can be passed in here. And we draw it, and if we click on that button, then the current conversation will plus, and we should add to the conversation count. So this has to be a pointer as well. So then we can dereference this as well, and we can pass it as a pointer. And then we can also say conversation count plus, and we can add to the y position y plus equals the rec dot height. And we have to actually do it here in the loop as well, so that we will move the next button down. And it should be UI gap as well, so that there will be some space between them. UI gap. And if we build this, then we have a new chat button, and if we click it, nothing happens. So why nothing happens? It flashes, but then nothing happens. So conversation count plus. So actually we should be drawing the other one right away if we add to this. So why is that not working? Let's add here printf new chat. And is that actually happening? If we click here, yes, we are doing new chat. And let's add also the D of the current conversation, dereferenced. And let's run this again. And if we click here, 52, what? Why is it 52? Current conversation. Okay, I have to put the parentheses here so that it will actually not change the pointer. So if I click now, then we have a second conversation, and a third and a fourth. Now something weird happened because we actually got some data from there, which might be because we haven't initialized the new conversation. So there's something in the memory at that location already. So let's try and do that. So what we should do is we should set the message list current conversation, and the first message. So wait a minute. We have conversations max messages and message max length. So can we actually set this to null? Is that possible? And this has to be dereferenced. And this cannot be null. So how do we actually initialize this? So do we need to pass all of these things? So message list, current conversation, messages, max message 0, max message length is null. And this has to be like that. And can it be null? Maybe it can. But what will happen if it's null? We get a warning. So we should set this to a null character. And we still get a problem here. We can't set it. We have to do strcpy into the first message a null character. So the first message of the conversation will be a null character. So now we don't get any errors. That's the old one. So if we now click here, we still get last hello. Why do we get last hello? So message list, conversation, and 0 is going to be a null character. So when we are drawing those, here we have the message count, and the message count is now 0. We have to have the message counts separately for each of the conversations. So we have to say that message count 0 is going to be, 0 to begin with. I guess we don't have to do that at first, but then we have to pass in the reference to the message count of this index, because now we have just one message count. So we are going to try to print as many messages as there are. So that is the problem. Message count. So we don't have to initialize anything. That was wrong. We do not need to do any of that stuff. Here, we don't need to do this. We just have to set the message count. And of course, we cannot set this to 0. We just set it like this. And I guess it's by default 0. But we get a segmentation fault now. And we got an error here. Message count. This should be message count of the current conversation. And let's try again. And now we opened it. And now if we click new chat, it empties out. And if we say hello here, then it will be added there and we will answer in this conversation. If we click on conversation 1, we open the first conversation. If we click here, we go back to this one. If we open a new one and we say write hello world in C, it will write hello world in C. And then I can add some more here. What is 1 plus 1? And it will answer here. And I can still go back to the second one, or the first one, or the third one. And I can add a new one. So now it works. Now we can change between the conversations. Of course, we are not saving them anyway yet. Maybe that is the next video. But yeah, we are able to have multiple conversations very easily. And everything is still responsive and wonderful. And if we pick any conversation, we can just add here then. Tell me a joke, and it will tell a joke. Now, there is actually no context in these chats, so it doesn't remember the old messages. ChatGPT doesn't, so we have to implement that as well in the future. But yeah, that is the end of today's video. Let me know in the comments what did you think of this video and what should I do next. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, then make sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.